When you think about what a magical girl's outfit is supposed to look like, there are probably a few key elements that spring to mind. Their outfit should be color-coded, covered in magical gems, plenty of bows, ribbons, ruffles and frills, puffy skirts and sleeves, and key accessories like gloves and jewelry. Combine any 3 or more of those elements and boom, instant magical girl. So making a magical girl should be a pretty straightforward process, right? Well, kind of. Since I'm adapting a set of 5 pre-existing characters from different films, I first have to decide how cohesive I want them to look as a team unit, and that essentially boils down to 3 options. I could give them all the same base uniform with some minor changes via color or accessories. This look often plays on the concept of a school uniform and is the most unified option. Or I could give them all different outfits but with a matching theme or accessory that ties their looks together. Or I could make them all unique and act as individuals that are working together. Since they're all the heroines of their own films, set in different time periods and settings, it makes sense that they should be able to individually stand on their own. So I decided the best route would be to make them all different. So what kind of magical girl would they be? With that question in mind, I started some small, simple sketching, and looking up different reference photos. While I was looking at other magical girl designs to make sure I was on the right track, I realized there were several common themes design-wise that kept popping up, such as the main magical girl style, which I would describe as classic. If you combine all the elements we talked about at the beginning of this video, that's what the prototypical magical girl looks like. But not all magical girls look like that. One of the other most popular versions of the magical girl is the witch type. There are a whole series based on the concept of a magical girl witch, but they occasionally pop up as a distinct character in a team unit too. Then there's the prince/princess type. Visually, the most this amounts to is usually just a tiny crown, but sometimes the character will also get a secondary regal form. The knight type is most easily identified by bearing some type of armor and a sword. Neither of these types should be confused with the subcategory princess knight. And the last category is the battle magical girl. Their outfits tend to be a little more bodysuit-esque and inspired by video games, sci-fi, and mech design elements. Obviously, these categories aren't going to cover all magical girls, and like the Princess Knight category, there will be some overlap, but it's a pretty good starting off point. So at this point, I'm working from the concept sketches and drawing them as more detailed designs. Since the outfits are what I'm focusing on, I'm not really fussed about dynamic posing or anything, I'm just trying to make everything readable. The program I'm currently using, which is not my usual setup, is Procreate on the iPad. Usually I would draw in Photoshop with my tablet, but hashtag not sponsored, Procreate has a feature where it automatically saves a time-lapse of your drawing, which is really cool. It's very simple and intuitive and just all around very easy for beginners. But on the other hand, it is a time-lapse, so it only saves the time you've spent actually working, which means it actually fails to show a lot of the art process, like zooming in on the canvas and what your layers actually look like and what you're doing in between those layers. And also the time it takes in between strokes while you're figuring out what your next move is going to be. And I only bring this all up because it makes the art process look much more streamlined and a lot easier. Like, it's a lot less going on. I can see why if you saw this, it would look like the canvas is drawing itself. Procreate also has a limit on how many layers you can make, and I was capped at about 100 layers for this piece, which did make my move of drawing them all on one canvas a bit hard to manage near the end. But drawing them all on one canvas makes them easier to reference and keep the proportions consistent, which is why I'm using Kiki as a base for everyone's height. Having the sketches all be done in the same session is helpful for keeping their end looks cohesive when put next to one another. I started out with the characters that I felt the most confident about drawing and were also my favorites, and then on the designs that I was less sure about. Sophie and Kiki were the most in my wheelhouse as they are dress-wearing witchy characters, and Kiki is absolutely my favorite Ghibli protag. This really depends on the design, but Sophie in particular really just came fully formed from the ether. I more or less knew exactly what she was going to look like, and that's probably because I drew her with so many of my favorite design elements. Being able to clearly visualize what you want your finished drawing to look like is so helpful. It really cuts down on work time in the long run. But more often, you just have to figure it out as you go. It's hard to know exactly how much time each drawing took to reach completion because I was working on this on and off between different projects, but maybe like a day and a half total for each character. Maybe 10 days total over the course of a month.
The design aspect made it a lot slower. Drawing a character with a set design would have probably taken about half that time. In the end, I think I like how they all turned out, but Nausicaä was a struggle. You'll see what I mean in a bit, but I just had a lot of trouble making her work. I think it's because her design is a little more sci-fi inspired, but this initial sketch just didn't feel right in my style, so I ended up having to rehaul her design completely later on. To be fair, looking back at this, I don't hate the design. I think I ultimately just got a little too lost in the weeds. I like the elements separately, like the hat and the goggles and the gas mask obscuring her face, making her this very mysterious traveler character. But in the end, I think she just looked a little too much like a sci-fi version of Link from The Legend of Zelda, which is absolutely right up my alley, but this look doesn't exactly scream magical girl. Once I had the sketches done, I realized that my previous designs were very delicate, so I just went over the sketches with a bit of a bolder line to make everything stand out and easy to see. And once I'm happy with everyone's sketches as a group, I start to work on characters individually. I started out with Sophie because I made her outfit very self-indulgent, and hence she ended up being one of my favorite designs. Obviously, she is a witch-type magical girl since she more or less is one in the book and also the film. You can check out my video on Howl's Moving Castle for more information about that. I took a lot of inspiration from Howl's design because he is so ostentatious and actually looks like a magical girl himself in the beginning of the film. I knew I wanted her to have a cape to match Howl's jacket, but that she would probably be a little bit more reserved than him. So to reflect that idea, I made the outside of the cape plain and put the pattern on the inside. Her witch hat is an extension of the hat she wears at the beginning of the film, and her dress also roughly matches the Edwardian era. Since Sophie is a working woman, and in the book she casts spells through her handiwork like sewing and crafting, I thought that if she didn't have an apron with pockets to hold all those items, she should definitely have a Chatelaine. Or Chatelaine, I think is how it's pronounced in French. A Chatelaine was a kind of hanging belt on a chain, and it was used to carry handheld tools and other trinkets. It was sort of like an all-purpose key ring. I remember learning about them a while ago from a Bernadette Banner video and got so excited during Encanto when I saw Abuela wearing one because I already knew what it was. I thought about what items one would usually carry on a Chatelaine, and what other items Sophie would personally want to have close to hand. So obviously I gave her some scissors and other little containers that probably have needle and thread, and a pocket watch because that's a classic. For the little details on her cape and dress, I thought a celestial theme would be appropriate since Calcifer was originally a falling star, but also just because it's pretty and I like it. The white hair blue dress combination is obviously inspired by her final look in the film. But the pink is actually a part of her original design, it's not from Howl. It's actually the color of the ribbon she uses to keep her braid in place. And not gonna lie, the blue-white-pink combo is also partially inspired by the fairy godmother from Cinderella. I think she just looks so cute and I want her outfit for me. Personality-wise, I think Sophie would be a very seasoned and collected magical girl. She's a bit older and more mature and would probably be the big sister / mom of the group. Sophie's been through a lot and also has a powerful wizard for a husband, so power-wise, I really wouldn't feel confident about messing with her. I guess I wanted to start with the two outliers age-wise with Sophie and now Ponyo. Since Ponyo is the youngest in the group, I tried to keep her features round and soft in order to convey that feeling of youth. And one of the ways I did that was to use a lot of circle shapes in her design. Her hood is a circle, her shorts are circles, she has a circle pattern on her cape. You can see I decided to change the tips of her cloak from a straight edge to a curve in order to really push that soft feeling. Ponyo's story is loosely based on The Little Mermaid, so I knew I wanted to lean into the mermaid princess vibe, so obviously she has a little crown and little poofy prince shorts. But I was also inspired by another similar mythological being called Selkies. In Celtic and Norse mythology, Selkies are seal women that can turn into humans by removing their seal coat. And I thought this would be perfect for Ponyo since the type of dress she's wearing is very similar to the Selkie dress which has been going around online for a while. I thought her coat could be what she uses to turn back into a fish, which is why it has little fin patterns and fish eyes on the side of her hood. Since Ponyo has a water association, I decided to play off the idea of a classic yellow raincoat with boots, since I think Sosuke wears something very similar during some point of the film. Ponyo is an extremely chaotic, bright, and high-energy character, So I originally wanted her to have mismatched socks, but it ended up just being a little too much. In the end, I still kept the different patterns, but I made them the same color. I also really had to resist making her coat blue. The yellow definitely makes a lot more sense for her character, but I just love blue. I did end up going with yellow in the end, but it was a hard choice. I don't know, does anyone else struggle with this? Which version is your favorite? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. So this is a few days later at the start of a new session, and I'm checking in on Nausicaä again, and it just isn't working. I think I got too wrapped up in the anatomy. Nausicaä's body type in the film is broad and muscular on top, and then she has this absurdly short torso and snatched waist in some shots, which really doesn't work in my style. I tried changing the pose to something more relaxed to see if that's what's throwing me off, and I'm trying so hard to make this base come together, and it just isn't happening. So I decide to try again from a different angle. Nausicaä has two main outfits in the film, but she also has this princess dress she wears like once. So instead of leaning into the battle knight angle, I decide to go for more of a princess knight. And at this point, I straight up erase the base and just go in with a totally new, messy, and loose sketch until it finally felt right. As soon as I gave her the extremely self-indulgent wizard/jester hat, I felt a lot better. Like I said before, I'm working in Procreate, which isn't my usual art program. But the way I drew Kiki here is kind of unusual because I went in with color first and then back over it with the finished line art, and then I cleaned up the color afterwards. Which is not my usual process, but I did the same thing with Sophie, so maybe it just depends on what kind of mood I'm in. Somewhat surprisingly, Kiki's outfit actually went through the most initial concept art. I think partially because she is my favorite Ghibli girl, but also because her base outfit is so simple, it's kind of hard to adapt that into a magical girl outfit. In the end, I combined the style of her green dress from the beginning of the film with the color and sleeves of her witch dress, and also added a couple other elements. I went with abstract plant imagery based off her mother's garden just to really lean into the cottagecore vibes. Her shoes are based off of the pretty red ones she's admiring in a window shop, the ones that she wants to buy but can't afford to because she spent all her money on household necessities like groceries, because frankly, she deserves them. Since Kiki is still in training and not a full-fledged witch, I imagine she would end up as Sophie's apprentice. Maybe Kiki doesn't have a specific magic power, and Sophie has to help her learn what she even wants to use her magic powers for. Even though her initial concept work ended up going through so much pre-planning, actually finishing her artwork was probably the most straightforward piece out of all of them. There weren't really any snags or anything, I just got lost in the zone. I did make one small addition right at the end because I was worried her outfit didn't read as a magical girl and just looked like a cute dress. So at the last minute, I added some gloves, which I think was the right move because the red accessories really ended up tying the whole piece together. Fun fact, gloves are actually my least favorite magical girl accessory. I think this comes from a practical place back when I used to cosplay a billion years ago, but you just have to take them on and off a million times at conventions and they just are so inconvenient. I feel the same way about character designs that have no room for pockets. You may notice that Nausicaä is the only character I initially drew with gloves, and that's because she was already wearing them on her main outfit. But all in all, I think the lacy sheer gloves are very cute on Kiki and do add a sort of sophisticated flair. And I had already made sure to give her pockets, so it's fine, it all evens out. And now we finally get to Chihiro, which is kind of funny because her concept was the first one I came up with during the pencil sketching phase. And her outfit style there more or less stayed the same all the way up to her final design with very little changes. Which, to be completely honest, in hindsight, I'm not as pleased with her design, but I'll get to that later. Conceptually for Chihiro, I thought it would be really cool if her power were being able to sneak around in the spirit world by pretending to be a spirit. Like, she took everything she knew from her days working in the bathhouse when she was younger in order to successfully navigate the spirit world. She could call on all her friends she made for favors and they could help her fight battles or give her information or guidance. Like, the soot spirits on her outfit can probably materialize and come to life and either shield her or act as a smokescreen. And with that in mind, I styled her like she was attending a festival and could just put on her mask and slip into the crowd unnoticed. And overall, I really like how she turned out, especially when it came to the little details. I really like the soot sprite pattern that's holding onto the competto, the little star-shaped candy. I like the mask that she based on No Face and that the seals on the jar look like bath tokens. But when it came time to color it all in, I ran into a small problem. The way I had styled Chihiro meant that she was basically a ninja. She's not a combat magical girl. Her role in a team is to help from the sidelines by summoning dragons and ghouls and stuff, or doing reconnaissance missions. Which means my gut instinct is to put her in black or purple, which is a problem because Chihiro has no purple in her color palette at all. And what's more, you can't actually make out the soot sprites when they're on a dark background. Even though I really like the dark outfit, and it is very much Chihiro blending into a crowd while pretending to be No-Face, that's just it. It doesn't feel like Chihiro, it feels like No-Face. So I have two other options. I can go with her casual clothes and pull from the green, white, pink, and yellow, or I can base it off of the pink uniform that she wears for most of the movie. So I try everything, and in a shocking twist of fate, pink ends up being the best option and looks the most like Chihiro. Which actually ends up being a new problem, because now it looks too similar to Chihiro's uniform, and if it weren't for the soot sprite pattern, they would look almost identical. But I had come this far, I was almost finished, and at this point there was no way I was going to start over. And besides, even if I didn't feel like she was the strongest, I still did like a lot of the elements from the original concept and how the actual drawing turned out in the end. Even though I realized while editing this video that her eye was in the wrong place. Let this be a warning to everyone, seriously, wait like a week before posting your art and just recheck it with fresh eyes, it makes a huge difference. But just for my own sake, I did doodle a couple more versions just because I wanted to see how they'd look. I think this design is definitely my favorite because it acts as the fully realized idea of Chihiro imitating No-Face. I did make a couple more designs to varying degrees of success, but I still think that the first No-Face design is the best. Alright, so we're finally ready for our last check-in with Nausicaä. Her new sketch was too rough to immediately go into final art, so I went in and cleaned everything up to get her sketch on the same level as everyone else. I actually did this part here earlier before coloring Chihiro because I prefer to work in stages but have everyone more or less roughly around the same place. You can see at this point I have her outfit finally mostly fleshed out. I'm just trying to figure out the last little details and accessories. I knew I wanted her to have some armor, like her chest plate and this skirt plate, but I kept going back and forth on whether or not she should have shoulder armor because of her cape. I also tried adding in some ruffled trim, which was cute, but the Utena-style military epaulets and extra dangly bits were just too much. Alright, I'm pretty sure that this is the start of a new day and a new drawing session because I am once again struggling at the beginning. Which, you know, is fine. Art is just like that. It takes a while to warm back up between sessions and get back into the swing of things. For instance, Nausicaä's face was surprisingly hard to draw, but I think she turned out alright in the end. Or, like, I'm having trouble with the chest plate, so instead of worrying about it, I just move on to the gloves instead. And by the time I finish sorting out the arms and giving her a haircut, I'm all warmed up and ready to tackle everything else. At the last minute, I decided to go with shoulder armor after all, as it gives her a slightly more intimidating silhouette, and more armor helps lean into the shell/carapace bug theme I was trying to tap into from before. It also helps to balance out the princess vibe, which did slightly overpower the original knight inspiration a little too much up until now. Like, Nausicaä is a princess, but she's a working princess. She's the leader of her community, and one of her responsibilities as leader is to protect her people, through combat if necessary. She can handle herself is what I'm trying to get at. I briefly considered giving her another bug-like face mask or medieval face covering, but ultimately decided against it. And at this point, Nausicaä's design is as straightforward as it can be. Nausicaä's cape is supposed to be an extension of her glider. Like Ponyo's cloak, it acts as a pair of wings that she can fly around with. As for other places where I pulled inspiration, Princess Kushana's armor for sure is one. Sayaka from Madoka Magica was a big contribution, largely in regards to vibe, but also legwear specifically. Nausicaä has these really chunky leg warmers, and I just couldn't make them look cute in my style. I tried so hard and it just didn't work. I knew Nausicaä's color palette would be tiny, mainly blues complemented with white accents and some red highlights, which in some ways made it easier and harder because it is so simple and there is less to work with. I have a tendency to go a little dark with my colors, but at least with digital art, you can go back in and retroactively brighten up the colors after you've finished a piece. After finishing Nausicaä, I actually did the same thing with the final version of Sophie and did some editing to make her colors a bit brighter, just because the lighting ended up making her a little too purple. Looking at them all together, honestly, I'm pretty pleased with this lineup. There are some things I would change, sure, but overall I'm really quite happy with how they all turned out. I think they stand on their own really well, but that they actually look even better all together. Like, they do look like a unified team, and I'm really happy with that. Seeing them all together after so much work is so satisfying, and it actually kind of makes me want to do something like this again. I don't know, maybe I'll make another video in the future with other Ghibli characters if that's something people are interested in. This is probably not what people are expecting, but I kind of really want to make a magical version of the Baron from The Cat Returns. I just think he would look so cute in that style. Or maybe some other franchise or combination thing would be fun. Nintendo characters as magical girls or something. Overall, I just had a lot of fun with this project, and I hope you did too in watching it. And with that being said, I want to give a big thank you to my patrons, and also welcome my new patrons. Thank you to my new patron, Martin de Rocker. This one's for you, bud. Alright, I'm signing out, and I just want to let you know that everything's gonna be okay.